My friend, the great Tom Keene, who conducted a superb interview this morning with Fed Governor Chris Waller up in New York.
Yeah, good morning. And Joe, I'll tell you, it's something. Joe, I'm a little bit in shock. I was in Houston 3 days ago, and you'd think they'd be talking about Chris Waller, or, you know, the Fed or price of oil and all that. No, all they want to know is Bregman going back to the Houston Astros? That's the only thing they want to know. Out of Boston, what's it going to take to get Bregman back to the Houston Astros? We'll have to see how that goes.
Tom Keene, always with 92.9 in mind.
92.9 FM in Boston. Good morning. And
yes,
Chris Waller had 92.9 FM Boston in mind as he looked across the nation. He's fearless, Joe, about saying it is in America. It's not just about the haves. He spent a lot of time talking about the have-nots. He had in there language talking about not one but many rate cuts. And what he really was interesting about was dissent. Christopher Waller on groupthink.
Well, one of the criticisms that's been leveled at the Fed for a long time is we engage in groupthink. Every policy decision is a 12-0 vote. There's no dissents. And that if you're all going to do exactly the same thing and think the same way, we don't need 19 of you. We need one. But what I always try to point out is it's through speeches and public speaking that everybody presents their views, and you can go out and listen, and they're not the same. So all the public speaking, the speeches are the way for us to show a diversity of opinions and thought about the direction of policy. This is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Despite people saying it's a cornucopia of noise, it's actually signaling where people stand. When you come to the meeting, and I always try to stress this to people, we have to make a decision every 6 weeks. We do not get to kick the can down the road. And what that implies is that to get a reasonable, consistent opinion, we have to kind of compromise. You have to come to a decision. And that's why our votes are often 12-0, 11-1. It's because we all understand we have to compromise somewhat on our positions to have a clear, consistent policy setting for markets and the American people.
Larry Meyer, Washington University, St. Louis, had a small book out of his time with Greenspan, a term at the Fed, and he was heated about the consensus vote, the need for consensus. Should we be more like the Bank of England, which seems like a fist fight every 6 weeks?
Yeah, I'd like to avoid the fist fight every 6 weeks. But, I mean, I personally think there's nothing wrong with dissents. It's a way to communicate differences in policy stances. You know, the whole complete consensus largely comes out of the Greenspan era, where it was like, if you have a 12-0 vote, there's no doubt about what policy should be. Everybody agreed with the chair at that time, and that kind of tradition continued. But as the Bank of England has showed, there's no point of having 19 of us if we always do the same thing. So at that point, what's wrong with having a few dissent? I dissented at the July meeting. I don't personally think that shows anything about loss of faith in the chair or not the right policy, but that's the whole point, is to say, look, I'm on this committee to have my own independent view and make these points. And that's what people are doing.
Here in Balance of Power, the governor of the Minnesotas, the Dakotas, and out to his Washington State, Christopher Waller, of course, always and forever associated with the St. Louis Fed. You know, Joe and Mario, I look at this, and Mario, I sort of felt like Mario in the Oval Office, Joe. If I say something wrong, I probably won't be invited back. Mario, it was a little bit delicate talking to Christopher Waller without mentioning the dreaded P word, the president. You know, it was a little clumsy at times because of the uproar in Washington about this selection process.
Yes, Tom, and I mean, welcome to my life where the president hangs over all things. One of the questions I really enjoyed from you was the question that you lobbed at him as a son of the Dakotas, where you asked about the two disparate economies that are taking place right now, the haves and the have-nots, and how they navigate that. Can you give a little bit of insight of what struck you about Waller's answer there, where he talked about some of that?
Let's go back here, if I have the time, Joe. Joe, I'm interrupting the surveillance nap here. It's a real problem.
I know. That's why you said it's good morning. It's good afternoon.
Exactly. And I look, Joe, at where he is, and he has to meet the criteria of the president if he's to be chairman. He has to represent as governor. And as he repeatedly said, he's got to go meeting to meeting to meeting. And what really struck me, Mario, was we talked about not one R-starred, which is fancy economic babble for where the comfortable rate is, but are there two R-stars? There's an R-starred, Joe, for 3 zip codes of Manhattan, and there's an R-starred for 60% of America flat on their back, like the farmers out in the Dakotas, the soybean crew. And it's this, his insight on 2 R-stars, I thought was very profound.
What does Christopher Waller say when he's alone in a room, presuming that has happened or will happen with the new guy? Stephen Miran described himself as out of consensus yesterday. They're clearly about as far apart as you're going to get here. Do they get along? Does he respect the new guy?
They all do. They're both trained PhDs, and they do get along with respect. I did not bring up a compare and contrast of Myron and Waller, but let's be honest, Joe, they solidly both demand lower interest rates. In that regard, they're on the same page.
And Tom, I mean, one of the disparate parts, I guess, the differences between the two is one is advocating for a much more cautious approach, and Myron is, I mean, he's in some ways parroting the line from the White House for something much more aggressive.
You're gonna get me in trouble here, guys. It's very different. Christopher Waller is much more of a centrist economist. He's talking with a huge humility. For being uncertain, for waiting for the data. He continually showed both sides of the coin, if you will. Myron studied under Martin Feldstein at Harvard, and there couldn't be more different. Feldstein is much more like Christopher Waller. Myron has a certitude. This is where we are. This is what we believe. There can be other outcomes, but at the same time, I believe this. And that's a very different tone, Joe, than modern economics. Joe, I got to go back to Red Sox baseball. It's like the people, April 25th that think the Red Sox are destined. I mean, Myron's talking that
See you in
tone.
October.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't get Tom Keene on very often, and I got to ask you just what you're looking at on the markets here, because you've got a VIX approaching 22 at the moment.
Thank you. Listen to
and you've got everybody talking about how much froth, how toppy, and if Tom Keene looks the wrong way at the camera, we sell off. You don't think I listen in the morning, do you?
Mario, this is too much. Matthew drank the Kool-Aid. David Brudney never knew where the VIX was. The VIX, Joe Matthew.
I bet that's true. And he knew the voice of global Wall Street.
He did. The VIX 22.02 now is a shock, and it was addressed beautifully by Jessica Menton today. She did some important research on it. It's highly unusual, Joe, to see these levels, to go to the Dow of 46,000. I need a VIX of 15 or 16, as Greenspan would say, a more quiescent number, and we don't have it. And let's drop down my Bloomberg. Joe, you don't even use the Bloomberg terminal, do you? I mean, you know
how they say you only use a fraction of your brain? Well, I kind of am like that with the terminal. Joe, I use it for what I need. Yeah.
Mario did this. We just popped 4,300 on gold. I got a print on the screen, 4300, up $98.50. I am telling you, with all the years, Joe, it's like the Red Sox playing in October or September. Highly unusual. That's where
gold like a growth stock with crude oil at $58 a barrel, and Mike McGlone has taken a serious victory lap because he predicted both of them.
Unbelievable how McGlone's been. It's sick.
How true. We got to give him a victory lap on the program for that, Mario, because it's true.
Yeah,
you buying gold yet or what?
I need to. Let me call. I need to call home.
Let us know.
Joe, can I ask a quick question?
Please, yes.
Mario, have you been over to the building of the ballroom?
No. I have not, but I've seen the Presidential Walk of Fame, and then I've also seen how they've plastered over what used to be the Rose Garden.
Yeah, the beautiful pavers now. But I'll tell you what, Tom, it's like a construction site over there. It's like a brownfield on the next to the east wing of the White House. He got the money last night, though. We're going to talk about this a little bit. Did you see who was in the room? I mean, they've got this thing paid for with money to spare, so they're talking about Arc de Triomphe. Going up now, I guess it would be Arc de Trump. Right in, the Rotary next to the Memorial Bridge there in Washington, D.C., outside of Arlington Cemetery, Tom. It's going to be like the Arc de Triomphe coming into Washington, D.C.
I'm not allowed to editorialize like you, Joe.
Have a great nap.